Hi, welcome to Jenskosmos, where I, Jenny, discuss history, pop culture, and books. Mostly books. And this video is the Jenskosmos Book Awards of 2023, so I will be awarding certain books that I read during the year. The first award is always the Congrats Jenny Read You award, and in 2023 I read 45 books. That's the most books I have ever read. So when I made my reading goals video, I said I would read the same amount in the next year or more. There's no way I'm going to read 45 books. Again, I'm just being realistic. So that goal has been scrapped. My goal right now is to read minimal, like 2 books a month, which would be 24 books. And I think that's a really great goal to have. Joel from Fictional Fates actually introduced this idea to me. So new reading goal. But back to last year. And let's start with the most fun read. And the book that gets the award is Unohdettujen unelmien kirjasta by Liina Putkonen, which translates to The Library of Forgotten Dreams. In this book, the main character, Aina, goes to a small town to work as the librarian at a very small community. She had lost her mother recently, and after grieving her for a year, she decides to change things up. She moves from the capital to a small town, at least for the summer. And it's a really heartwarming, lovely story about learning about your family history, because Aina, the main character, knew nothing about her family, and the family is actually connected to the small town that she works at. Obviously, there's stumbling in the beginning, but eventually it's just a lovely, warm, fuzzy book. Of course, it deals with grief, strange relationships within a family, and so on. But I really enjoyed reading this during my Christmas break. Next up is the most out of comfort zone book read. This is a new award, and I had this book in mind that I really wanted to talk about. And that book, which was the most out of my comfort zone read, is The Man Who Spoke Snakish by Andrus Kivirähk. So last year I went to Tallinn, Estonia's capital, and I was really impressed by Estonia, especially by the Museum of Theatre and Music. I just had this kind of admiration and realization of how unique and incredible Estonian culture is. So I wanted to know about the literature aspect of Estonian culture as well. So I went to top 10 Estonian books translated into English, some kind of list like that, and this was the first one. So this book is about Lemet, who seems to be a young man, teenager to young man, lives in the forest, and slowly the forest is emptying of its people and people are moving into town. So the story is kind of based on Estonian mythology, but also Estonian history in the Middle Ages when Germany ruled over Estonia. Lemet is one of the few people still left in the forest, and the forest people had the talent of speaking Snakish, so communicating with the animals, but he is one of the few people who can still do that. More and more people are leaving the forest, and I think one that really stood out to me from the book was when Lemet's best friend Bertel moves to this town, and at first he's like, I'll come over to the forest all the time, we'll always be friends. But then again, the life in the town is so different that Bertel forgets about Snakish, becomes afraid of animals, especially snakes, even though they are the people's friend in the forest. So seeing Bertel change was really interesting to read. I read fantasy books very little. So the reason why this is so out of my comfort zone, because I've read many mythology inspired books this year. This is very different to those. Getting used to the idea that humans are communicating with animals. Surely it's not a unique idea, but it's been a while since I've read about those, Narnia last time. And also human bear relationships. That was a bit icky, and at times, discussions of girls' bodies were a bit ugh. I'm really glad I read this book. You know, it's based on a location that I haven't read books from before. And it was a very unique story as well. Next up is the best non-fiction book. And before I go to the best non-fiction book, I want to mention a couple that I really enjoyed. James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time. I think this was very easy to understand. Thoughts about racism and classism and overall America that still apply to this day. This is my first James Baldwin, and I really loved his way of writing. It felt very like it reached my heart, and I would love to read more of James Baldwin. On Palestine by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé. I have read Ilan Pappé's 10 Myths About Israel before, and I really thought that was good. And I thought this was a very great book for someone who wants an introduction to Palestine. What solutions are there? Are there any solutions? What is the situation on the ground right now? And yeah, I thought this was extremely educational. Obviously, I am very well aware of what has been going on in Palestine for many years, but I still thought it was good to get like a refresher and be reminded of everything that has been going on. But the best non-fiction is Light in Gaza, which was edited by Jihad Abu Salim, Jennifer Bing, and Mike Merriman-Lotze, and it was released in 2022. It's a collection of essays and some poems by authors from Gaza. I read this book at the end of the year 2023. I actually started it in November, and then I kind of restarted it in December. If you want a deep, great, reflective, emotional, very well-made essay collection about everything related to Gaza or Gaza, please read this. It's so important. They discuss so many aspects related to Gaza that aren't really in the mainstream media, and it's just so well built. Also, all the aspects and themes that are discussed, they are very well presented. Chapters that really stood out to me, and I thought all of it was really great, was Lost Identity, The Tale of Peasantry and Nature by Asma Abu Mesid. I have an interest in peasant history, so it was interesting to learn about peasant history in Palestine and more specifically in Gaza. Really great discussions about what it's like to be a farmer and how bittersweet it is because you want to be a farmer, but Israel stops at you every possible moment and destroys your lands and destroys the water, and just everything's so hard to fathom. And then above all, this incredible love towards the land is at the core, is in the text as well. Then another essay that stood out for me is Exporting Oranges and Short Stories, Cultural Struggle in the Gaza Strip by Musab Abu Toha. Basically, Musab Abu Toha builds a library in Gaza and names it after Edward Said. And like the struggles of getting books into Gaza is absolutely ridiculous. The obstacles that Israel makes Palestinians go through, like it goes so deep, and it's so infuriating that no one's doing anything. Like people would donate books, but they would send them to West Bank, and they'd tell Musab Abu Taha, like, go collect them from West Bank and pay us $700. And it's like he cannot physically leave Gaza, and But it was really like important to like read about the power of literature, the power of reading, the power of education. Musab Abu Toha was kidnapped by Israel at the end of the year, but he was then released. But it's just infuriating. This essay was so well written, and you know, as someone who loves books, it was very important to read. And then the last essay I want to highlight, though read the whole book, is Gaza Asks, When Shall This Pass by Refat Al-Hariri, and it's a personal account of his experiences in Gaza, the power of literature and education. Refat Al-Hariri was killed by an Israeli strike in December. He was a very important English professor in Gaza, and just I read this chapter in November, but then I read it again in December, and it's just it hurts deep. I would like to read some passages I highlighted from this specific essay from page 31 by Refat Alarir. I remember when I first heard the question, how many more Palestinians should be massacred for the world to care about our lives? I thought naively that repeating the question would change people. It would make them think and reconsider their positions. And then this is what Refat Alarir told his students. Writing is a testimony, a memory that outlives any human experience, an obligation to communicate with ourselves and the world. We lived for a reason, to tell the tales of loss, of survival, and of hope, I told my students, and that's how he came up with Gaza Writes Back. Then I would like to read his poem that is at the end of this essay. This is by Refat Alarir. On the shores of the Mediterranean, I saw humanity drenched in salt, face down, dead, eyes gouged, hands up to the sky, praying or trembling in fear. I could not tell. The sea, harsher than the heart of an Arab, danced there, soaked with blood. Only the pebbles wept, only the pebbles. All the perfumes of Arabia will not grace the root Israel breathes. May he rest in forever peace. He should not be dead. 20,000 Palestinians should not be dead. And we need a permanent ceasefire and end to the occupation now. Lights in Gaza is available as a free ebook from Haymarket Books. I really recommend you download it and read it. It's a remarkable book and a very necessary read right now. The best Finnish book is Tuve Jansson's Kesäkirja, translates to Summer Book. I have talked about this book many a time on this channel, but it's a very warm recollection of a grandmother and her granddaughter living at their summer cottage on a Finnish island. It's so warm, it feels like a hug while reading, and the language is so beautiful. And it's available in English. I really recommend you read it. Okay, so the worst book of the year is The Gardener by Sally Vickers. So it's about two sisters who recently lost their father. They buy a property in the countryside, and Hassie, who is a children's book illustrator and just got out of a difficult relationship, takes the responsibility of renovating the cottage while Margot comes in and out of London every once in a while. While the idea and the premise of the book was good, the execution was very poor. I just could not connect with this book at all. Whenever the romance of Hassie, the one she had, was brought up, it annoyed me, and Margot's character of being sort of superficial was not done in a very believable manner. They didn't go full out. There is a side character, Masfoot, I do not remember her name, this was online, who is like eccentric and sharp, but in a very stereotypical way. And the book also attempts to comment on xenophobia through the character of Murad, who is an Albanian immigrant who helps Hassie with the garden. But it is done in a poem manner, and I did not like this book. So I cut out best fiction category because the best book that I read this year was fiction. So I thought it would be silly to award best fiction when the best book is fiction, if that makes sense. I want to give some honorary mentions. Babel by R.F. Kuang was really a captivating story. Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. I felt like I was reading an epic in this retelling of Ramayana. It captured my soul. It was so good. But the book that I crown as the best book of 2023 for me is As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katu. I think it's interesting that I made a video where I said that I've grown out of YA and now my favorite book of the year is YA, but it just hit different. Oh, wow, just wow. So the main character, Salama, is a pharmacy student, but as the Syrian revolution takes place, she ends up being a doctor helping at the hospital. She has basically lost everything, her family members, her house. She does have her sister-in-law Leila, who is pregnant with her the whole time, and all of her fears and anxiety and worries and, well, PTSD has kind of become an imagined person that feels real to her called Kwach, and he represents all of those fears that Salama has. And then Salama meets Kenan, who she realizes she was actually supposed to marry, but then everything happened and they kind of re-meet again. And it's really sweet that in all of these horrible atrocities, they have this very sweet human reaction to each other. I had a very strong reaction to this book. I had like audible reactions to events of the book. There is one plot twist that like made me so upset that I would like go to her like, no fucking way, what the fuck just happened? And that doesn't happen often with my books. I mean, I do like react, of course, but it was such a strong connection. So of course it had to be the best book of the year. What I thought was really super well done was that no character was absolute good and no character was absolute bad. Everyone was grey, everyone had moral, not issues, but no one was like morally perfect. Everybody had something that they were not proud of or decisions they had to make due to the circumstances they were in. I also learned a lot about what has happened in Syria and about Syrian people. It's an amazing story and I really recommend reading it because it's filled with such deep, complex reflections of people in such a difficult, dire, atrocious situation. Alright, so those were the most memorable, the most notable books I read in 2023. What did you read last year? What are your plans for next year? I am now 27. It feels very strange, but you know, I'll try to grow into it. Thank you so much for watching and I hope I see you in the next one. Bye!